Welcome back, Guardians of Dominion. Zeus here with another strategic breakdown. Today we're taking a closer look at a hero that many players build the wrong way, and that mistake can cost you resources, tempo, and value in battle. By the end of this video, you will see exactly where the real strength is, what actually matters in development, and why this hero can become a much smarter investment than most players realize. We dive into the Polaris Priority Guide. Polaris is a very interesting hero, and honestly, I do suggest that every player develops Polaris at some point. I'll explain exactly why, because once you understand how her skills work, it becomes much easier to see her real value. Polaris is not one of those heroes you build because of raw damage. She brings value in a completely different way, and that is why she deserves a place in your roster. First, we need to look at Polaris' skills so we can understand what makes her good and why she is such a useful hero to have available. Her first skill is Pulsing Comet. What this skill does is activate Polaris' first artifact, which gives the entire team magic penetration. That part alone is already very important, because it means Polaris can boost the damage potential of your whole magic-based team. The skill itself says that Polaris attacks the most distant enemy with Pulsing Comet and deals damage, but the actual damage is 31,000 magic damage. Even so, this is not the kind of damage that makes Polaris a real damage dealer in battle. That is not her role. In terms of concept, Polaris is a support hero, and that is the right way to look at her from the start. Then we move to the second skill, Glacial Fortress. This skill creates an ice barrier that can withstand 3 hits, and when the barrier explodes, it deals 11,000 damage. It is also important to notice what these skills scale from. The first skill we just mentioned is based on magic attack, while the second skill is based on Polaris health. Now, Glacial Fortress is very interesting because the barrier Polaris creates does not work like a normal shield with a certain amount of health. It does not matter whether the incoming hit is small or huge. The barrier simply withstands 3 hits. That is the key point. It is not absorbing a fixed amount of damage. It is counting hits. So whether the enemy attacks with weak damage or with something very heavy, the barrier still holds for those 3 strikes. Because of that, you do not need to overinvest into Polaris health just to make this skill stronger, especially when the explosion itself is not the real reason you use her. The damage from this skill is not what makes Polaris valuable. Her value comes from the effects she brings into battle. Then we come to Northern Lights, and this is where Polaris becomes even more interesting. Northern Lights increases control duration and also reduces the activation chance of skills that rely on probability by 10. That can be very important in certain matchups. For example, Sebastian has skills that depend on a chance to activate, and Polaris can reduce that chance. In some cases, that can make those effects much less reliable, and sometimes it can make them feel almost non-existent in battle. And the big advantage here is that Northern Lights is not based on Polaris stats. To make this skill effective, you only need to level it to 110 by using gold. That means its usefulness does not depend on having a maxed Polaris. The same logic continues with True Freeze. This skill interacts with Pulsing Comet and Glacial Fortress and increases magic damage by 140%. Once again, this skill also does not depend on Polaris stats. That means you can simply level the skill with gold, and it will work at full value even if Polaris herself is not highly developed. In other words, Polaris can be level 130 and still not be fully built, yet this skill can function as if she were maxed. That is a huge reason why Polaris is such a cheap and efficient hero to have in your roster. And this is really the most important thing to understand about Polaris. Northern Lights does not depend on stats. True Freeze does not depend on stats. But even Pulsing Comet and Glacial Fortress still remain useful when Polaris is undeveloped, because their effects are connected to True Freeze, which is her violet skill. So even if Polaris does not have high health, Glacial Fortress will still create that barrier, it will still stand for 3 hits, and when it explodes, it will still apply the True Freeze effect. That means the skill still does its job. The same goes for Pulsing Comet. Whenever it activates, True Freeze can also come into play, and Polaris artifact will activate as well. So again, even without heavy investment, Polaris still gives you meaningful value in battle. That is why I consider Polaris one of the cheapest heroes you can have in your roster. You do not need to max Polaris. You do not need to focus on turning her into a damage dealer. You do not need to chase big magic attack numbers for her. The main thing you need is for Polaris to stay alive on the battlefield as long as possible, because the longer she survives, the longer she keeps supporting your team. With that mindset, when we move to Polaris skins, the priorities become much clearer. Polaris has the default skin, Spring Skin, Cybernetic Skin, and Romantic Skin. The default skin gives intelligence, and the Spring Skin gives magic attack. But since Polaris is not a damage dealer, magic attack is not the main thing we want to focus on. Our real goal is to help Polaris survive longer. Because of that, the priority should be Polaris Cybernetic Skin for magic defense and Polaris Romantic Skin for armor. These 2 skins help Polaris remain on the battlefield longer, and that is exactly what you need from her. After that, you can continue with the Spring Skin and the default skin. And to be honest, even if you never fully develop Spring Skin and default skin, Polaris will still do her job. Even if you only invest into Cybernetic Skin and Romantic Skin, she can already provide strong value. Then we move to items. Here, there is no very strict priority like with some other heroes. The only real thing you should keep in mind is this: prioritize the items that give Polaris health, armor, or magic defense. Again, everything comes back to the same logic. You want Polaris to remain in battle. Every rank gives you 6 items, and from those 6, you should start by building the pieces that improve her survivability. That is also why you do not need to stress yourself trying to push Polaris to red +2 as fast as possible. Even if your Polaris is only orange, she can still work perfectly well. You only need to develop her to a level where she can stay in battle long enough to provide the support your team needs. Once she can do that consistently, she is already doing her job. Now moving to Glyphs, the priority is also very clear. Focus on health first. After that, go with armor. These are the 2 most important glyphs for Polaris because they directly help with the one thing we care about most, keeping her alive. After health and armor, you can continue with intelligence. Intelligence is more useful than it may seem at first, because besides its general benefits, every point of intelligence also gives Polaris 1 point of magic defense. So even there, you are still indirectly helping her survive. After that, you can go into magic attack and magic penetration if you want, but honestly, these are not necessary priorities. The reason is simple. Polaris is not your damage dealer. She does not need magic penetration to fulfill her role, and she does not need high magic attack to justify her presence in battle. So if you have other heroes who need those resources more, I would absolutely skip magic penetration glyph for Polaris. I would also not rush magic attack. If your resources are limited, keep the focus on survivability and stop there. When it comes to Gift of the Elements, there is really nothing special to prioritize. Its development is straightforward, so there is not much to discuss there. Now let's talk about Polaris artifacts, because this is where there is a bit more to consider. First, I would go with Tome of Arcane Knowledge. The reason is that it gives 2 useful stats, health and magic attack, and both of them help Polaris in the way we actually want. Health obviously improves her durability. The second artifact priority for me is Ring of Intelligence, because once again, intelligence gives Polaris more durability through magic defense. It is another solid defensive boost for a hero whose main job is to stay alive and keep supporting. And then we have Guiding Star, the magic penetration weapon artifact. This one is also very important, because this is the artifact that supports your team. If you are using Polaris in a magic team, that magic penetration boost matters a lot. So while Tome of Arcane Knowledge is the first artifact I would focus on, after that the choice between Ring of Intelligence and Guiding Star becomes closer. For me personally, Guiding Star and Ring of Intelligence are very close in priority. Maybe I would give Guiding Star a slight edge, because Polaris is there to support the team, and the artifact weapon is a direct part of that support. But at the same time, Ring of Intelligence also helps Polaris survive longer, which lets her support for a longer period. So both are valuable, and both make sense right after the tome. Finally, we move to Ascension. Here again, there is not too much complexity in terms of priority. The same logic still applies from start to finish. Focus on defense first. Go for health, then continue into defensive and intelligence-based development. You can take magic attack or other offensive bonuses later, but they are not what makes Polaris valuable. The entire Polaris priority guide can really be summarized in one clear idea: do not build Polaris like a damage dealer. Build her like a support hero, who needs to stay alive. The longer she remains in battle, the more value she gives through True Freeze, through Northern Lights, through Glacial Fortress, and through her artifact activation. That is why her defensive development matters the most. So when you develop Polaris, focus on defense. Focus on health, armor, magic defense, and the tools that help her survive. If you follow that logic, Polaris will already do her job for your team without demanding heavy investment, and that is exactly what makes her such a smart hero to have in your roster. So overall, Polaris is one of the smartest support investments you can make. You do not need huge resources to make her useful. The key is simple: keep her alive, let her stay in battle, and she will keep supporting your team with control, extra magic damage value, and artifact activation. Now let me know in the comments, how are you building Polaris, and has she been working well for your team? If this video helped, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next Hero Wars guide. Salute and friendship, and now it is time to build smarter and win more battles.